Good evening or good morning. I began talking in the last lecture about Plato, and now we want to examine, for a very short period of time, how Platonic ideas affect ethics. One way to begin is with another famous Platonic scene. This is the myth of the cave. Socrates is talking with some people in the Republic, and he says, let's imagine some prisoners, and you're going to have to endure my artwork. Let's not use the word art. Imagine some prisoners. So we'll put, here's a prisoner seated on a chair. There you can see him, he's seated there, and he's compelled to sit on the chair. He's tied down. He's in a cave. He doesn't know it, but behind him there is a wall. His entire life, he and there are other prisoners, are forced to look at the wall in front of them. Behind them, there is a trench, and there are actors who stand back here, and they hold puppets on sticks. And behind the actors, there is a fire burning. So naturally, or at least in the story, the fire throws shadows on the wall. And the prisoner and the other prisoners watch the shadows. And that's all they ever know. So they take the shadows to be reality. They live in a world of appearances. The myth of the cave was made into, or at least portions of this idea, were used in a Jim Carrey movie some years ago called The Truman Show, where Truman lives in an artificial world his entire life, and he doesn't know it, but his whole life is a TV show, right? He's being broadcast to the world, and so people are fascinated by Truman, and they watch him grow up. But the shared idea that is borrowed from Plato is that he lives in a cave. He's watching appearances. And then someday, imagine, Socrates says to his friends, that once we have this situation set up, somebody comes into the cave and frees one of the captives so that and force them to turn around and walk around the wall. And for the first time ever, they realize that the things that they were watching on the wall were merely appearances, and now they see the actors with their puppets. And of course, the way the cave is constructed, when the actors speak, the voices echo off the wall so that the prisoners actually think that the voices are coming from the things they see. In the Truman Show, with modern technology, we believe that we can easily imagine a much greater deception. Socrates comes up with this all in the ancient world. But now, would the prisoner welcome this change? No, it would be very difficult. When he leaves looking at the wall and looks at the fire will be bright and will hurt his eyes. Now imagine that the prisoner is taken up the long cave, up to the surface of the world. And now he sees things not in the light of a fire, but in the light of the noonday sun. This too will be very unpleasant for him. But now he sees things the way they are. Now imagine that this prisoner went back down into the cave and sat down next to the other prisoners. All the while, they're living their entire lives looking at appearances only. And they're expert in appearances. They give each other prizes for who really knows, of course they don't say appearances, who really knows about the world. But now our our victim, what should we call him? Our enlightened one, he comes and sits down. Will he have any interest in the prizes that they give for being expert in the shadow play? No. He'll say things to them like, why do you waste your time on this? Why don't you give your attention to truth and understanding and the perfection of your soul? That's a quote from Socrates in his defense. Remember, he was tried for being a corrupter of the youth, and he was convicted. In the end, what did they do to him? What would they do to the man who comes back into the cave? If he keeps speaking up that way, he doesn't care for shadows, they'll kill him. So what actually happened to Socrates? He was executed. But then at the end of the story in the Republic, and Socrates says, and we are the prisoners. We live in a world of appearances, and we put all of our attention on food and clothes and fancy houses, when the real things, the eternal things, are spiritual. Well, he doesn't say spiritual, but we would call them spiritual. Truth and beauty and the good. So you can see how Platonism emphasizes what have come to be called spiritual things. A different Platonic book, this one's called the Symposium, all of them written by Plato. In the Symposium, you have a group of men who have gathered together after a play to celebrate. One of them, a man named Agathon, has won a prize for his play. And for fun in the evening, they decide to give speeches in praise of the god of love, Eros. And we have a number of speeches, some of them serious, some of them very funny. Aristophanes says, well, once upon a time, human beings had 4 legs and 4 arms, and they whirled around as balls, but they tried to go up Mount Olympus, and Zeus was angry at them, so he split them in 2. And so now every human being has 2 arms and 2 legs, and one is male and one is female, and we go around looking for our other half. So that is why we are driven by desire to find another half, so that we can, find our true love. At the end of, or near the end of the Symposium, after others have given their stories, Socrates gives his story, his praise of love. He says, first of all, I don't know anything about love, but I'll tell you what Diotima, a wise woman, told me. So it's interesting that Socrates brings in another working class person, and in this case, a woman. And Diotima says, love starts as desire. We all have that desire for that beautiful body. Boy, does that body look good. But it's not just this one, or you recognize that besides the body that I love, there's another body. And that body is beautiful too. So you recognize that beauty is more than just one body. You recognize the beauty of many bodies. And then you recognize that beauty is not just in beautiful bodies, but it's also in, and Diotima says, institutions and laws. Is there a beauty in the law of pi r squared? Take pi times the radius. When you square it, you get the area. Is there a beauty there? Well, so Diotima says beauty is more than just bodies. It is all kinds of things. And when you search for beauty, notice the theory of the forms coming in here. You come to recognize that beauty is in institutions and laws. And soon you're not interested in the beauty of this body anymore. You're interested in beauty itself. An interesting doctrine. You can start with sexual desire and move up the ladder of love step by step until you're in love with goodness itself, the form of the good. Platonism has several different ways it touches on morality. We've already seen some of them. I already mentioned Socrates' joke at the end of the Phaedo. One of his friends says, well, how shall we bury you, Socrates? And Socrates says, any way you like, if you can catch me. The real person is not his body, it's his soul that flies away. Also, in Platonism, we discuss with the ladder of love in Symposium, we move away from the love of bodies and luscious lips and the things that young people fall in love with. We move to a love of the soul. And so you've probably heard the phrase, a platonic relationship. In a platonic relationship, I would love my beloved not for her body, but for her mind. Now, recognize that these ideas have had great influence on our culture. What does it really mean to love your beloved? In Platonism, there is a pursuit of the higher forms. The moral life is not something that is accomplished all in a day. We keep going all our lives pursuing knowledge of beauty and the good and truth. As I've been saying throughout, there's a heavy emphasis on the virtues, courage, love, friendship. I think you can see how these emphases in Plato were welcomed 3 centuries later, or 4 centuries later, by Christian writers. They see Plato, or Socrates is the hero in the books, as one early Christian writer put it, a Christian before Christ, because he's on the side of moral truth, and he's on the side of moral progress and pursuing the good. But that then raises the question of Platonism and Christianity. As I said, sometimes Christians read the Bible with their Plato glasses on. And so when we read anything about bodies and souls, we read about it in Platonic terms, that bodies are bad and souls are good. Bodies always lead us astray. Should Christians believe that? It does seem that there are some sins that we associate with the body, drunkenness, maybe anger. But what about sins like bitterness or envy or pride? I'm going to just suggest, it is a danger to read the scripture with your Plato glasses on. In particular, what happens when you die? Socrates says your soul flies away. And many, many Christians believe that. And then you say, well, wait a second. The New Testament teaches that we will be raised. The Christian hope is resurrection. Paul insists on it in 1 Corinthians 15. Platonic dualism seems to undermine resurrection. What is our hope? So I have suggested that in some ways Platonism may deform Christianity. It has certainly had great effects on Christianity over the centuries. I'm really just suggesting that you think about it for yourself. We'll move on to Aristotle next week.